This week is a bit of a palate cleanser given all the murdering and dead bodies we've been discussing of late. This is about marriage. Well, separations and possible divorces in the court of one Justice Blanchard, whose name frequently appears in the paper because issues with marriage are frequent. Here are a couple of cases that had a bit of sauce to them, more than what your normal case might have. March 12, 1914. Thomas Corrigan wants to be legally separated from his wife, Josephine Corrigan, who is an actress. The grounds? His bride, post-nuptials, decided that there would be no more hanky-panky of any kind. Justice Blanchard was told by Corrigan that marital relations only existed for the first 7 weeks of the marriage, and then here comes the mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, according to Corrigan, is the one that told her daughter to be cold to her husband. This extensive treatment became a normal part of his wife's demeanor, and his wife basically told him to go away and stay away for a year. Literally, a year. Corrigan told the judge, quote, "At the end of the year, I was to return to her. It was understood, of course, that I was to provide for her during this absence," end quote. Corrigan was asked, quote, "Prior to this, what had been her attitude towards you?" End quote. He responded, quote, "She was all that a loving and affectionate wife should be," end quote. He was then asked, quote, "After her mother's interference, what occurred?" Quote, "Mrs. Corrigan declined to allow me to kiss, caress, or to fondle her, and her mother never would permit us to be alone. I withstood this attitude on the part of my wife and her mother as long as I could, and then I packed my grip and left," end quote. Josephine, the wife, said that Corrigan did not properly provide for her. She gave the court a note that she said was written by her husband, which said, quote, "Dear Madame, the writer is now residing at the Hotel Prince George with Miss Bessie Fewclose. Any further communication, please address to my attorney, Corrigan," end quote. Josephine's mother, aka the mother-in-law, was in court to deny that she did anything he described in trying to part them. The couple were married September 1911. 1913, they had a baby boy, and apparently this child has been cared for by Josephine's mother since he was born. Why that was, I don't know. So here's where the story went weird. Well, weirder. All seems like, this happens to marriages. Well, buckle up. Justice Blanchard of the Supreme Court of New York sentenced Josephine to a spanking. Do what now? Yeah, you heard me. A bit of a spanking. Josephine's mother, Mrs. Martha Collins, who Josephine is living with, allegedly said she's been doing, quote, "all of the spanking for the family for many years, and that judge or no judge, there is going to be no spanking at this time. That is, if she knows anything about it," end quote. Josephine, preparing for a trip to Boston, spoke to a reporter and said, quote, "I have my opinion of that old judge. The idea of his ordering a spanking for me and believing all that rot my Mr. Corrigan was telling in court. He said that I wouldn't kiss him. That is quite true. But why should I when I realized that his desire to kiss me was planned to win commendation for him from his adopted meal ticket, my mother, and then later to persuade me to open the door for him when he had remained away for weeks at a time. He says that I wouldn't go out with him without my mother or a chaperone. I have a pretty good memory, and as I remember it, there was but once during our 3 years of married life that he offered to take me out. Then he had 4 tickets for the theater and told me to invite my mother and a girl to go. And at that, when we got to the theater, we found out that the tickets had been given to him for tacking up signs and were only good for the gallery. And we were all dressed up in our best. Before we were married, he told me he had a farm of 1,000 acres or so in Ireland. He said that we would go to Lakewood to spend our honeymoon. After the wedding, when I was figuring on the time the train left for Lakewood, he told me that his remittance from the old country had been delayed. And he suggested that we live with my mother until it came. We lived there for many months without again mentioning the remittance and the honeymoon, and then one day he said he had bought a lot and was going to build a garage on it. My brother and I investigated this lot and found it to be the nicest little chunk of the Harlem River imaginable. Then I told him he would have to get out and provide a home for me. He went away, returned a month later with the information that he had bought a nice little flat. He said that he had filled it with fine furniture and china that he had bought cheaply in broken lots. I went to the flat. It was a one-room affair right next to a sawmill that ran night and day. His broken lot of furniture in China was about the brokenest lot that could be found on any dump. And so I went home and refused to kiss him, refused to see him, and refused to have any communication with him. And really, I don't think I'll be spanked for what I have done. Do you?" End quote. The reporter apparently admitted he didn't. I'm sure after all of that, the reporter wasn't going to try to provoke her any further either. Corrigan said that he had provided a good home for his wife, and she refused to live in it and would not kiss or see him. He said that in his opinion, quote, "the whole thing was a case of too much mother-in-law," end quote. Of course, I found no updates. I'm assuming that they were told to figure their relationship out, and I didn't see if any judicial spankings were rendered. You want more Judge Blanchard, who thinks the spanking is a good course of justice? Well, honestly, the man deals with a lot of cases that no doubt would make anyone shake his head. Here's one in 1915 where he got, well, extra judgy. Harry Mencken brought a divorce suit against his wife, Elizabeth. The judge dismissed the suit and decided to tell his opinion, which, being a judge, he is free to do. He said that wives who go dancing into the wee morning hours with men who are not their husbands are no better than denizens of the underworld. Mrs. Mencken hid her face in her hanky at this denouncement, and her boy toy, whose beautiful eyes did a number on Mrs. Mencken, promptly left the courtroom. But the judge wasn't done. He also dismissed the Mrs. separation suit against her husband due to no evidence. He said, quote, "I have listened with a great deal of patience to this case. The whole case was an echo from the underworld. It gave me a glimpse into that hidden part of New York life, and indeed, it was not pleasing to listen to. Mrs. Mencken was indiscreet. She did what no self-respecting married woman would do when she went out with men not her husband and danced and dined with them until early hours of the morning. Being introduced to men by false names was something she never should have done. It was highly indiscreet." End quote. Judge just really seemed to be done with the whole shebang. He disbelieved most of the evidence given by Mrs. Hazard, former friend. Yeah, well, she told the court how the alleged boy toy scampered around the apartment in his summer underwear and kissed the missus. The judge also said to heck with George Brandt's testimony, brother-in-law, and also the testimony of a detective, because their description of the missus's kimono on the night of the raid was not corroborated by what Mrs. Hazard had said. Quote, "I don't like that sort of testimony, and I did not think it proved anything against this woman other than indiscretion." End quote. Poor Justice Blanchard. I'm sure he heard a lot of interesting things while tending to his court. If you enjoyed this story or any previous stories, please like and subscribe. Thank you.